Hollywood has always loved to flaunt illusions, but this list will shatter every belief you ever had about what it means to be tough or a man of steel. Before the fame, before the red carpets, before the studio contracts, these men were forged in prisons, slums, dojos, street gangs, battlefields, and the darkest corners of America. Some had bones broken. Some faced real violence. Some survived addiction, near-death experiences, and a society determined to bury them. Yet they still rose. Each of them brings to the screen a raw energy that no CGI or acting technique could ever replicate. These are the 10 toughest black actors in Hollywood history legends, shaped by real lives marked by blood, steel, and a will to survive. Who are they, and how did they endure long enough to... Danny Trejo, the man who walked out of hell. Danny Trejo is one of those Hollywood faces you can glance at once and instantly know this is not someone you want to start trouble with. But to understand why an actor can carry an aura so dangerous that even a camera seems cautious around him, you have to trace his life back to its origins, to the years when even the devil himself would have stepped aside. Danny Trejo grew up amid the violence-soaked slums of Los Angeles in the 1960s and 70s, where gangs ruled and the sounds of gunfire and police sirens were so familiar, they became the soundtrack of childhood. He was hooked on heroin at age 12, selling drugs by 13, and in and out of prison throughout his teenage years. In that world, there was no room for weakness. You either learned how to survive, or you were buried behind someone's house. Trejo chose to survive at any cost. But the real turmoil began when he arrived at San Quentin, the prison known as the stomach of America's hell, where serial killers, cartel leaders, and society's most discarded men were packed together in an atmosphere of suffocating violence. Here, Danny wasn't just forced to be strong. He was forced to become more dangerous than fear itself. No one could imagine that a young man barely 1.67 meters tall and weighing under 70 kilos could dominate the prison boxing ring. But Trejo did. He became lightweight champion, then middleweight champion inside the prison, defeating opponents far heavier and far more vicious. The fights had no rules, no referees, only survival or death. And in those fights, Trejo was nearly stabbed to death at least 3 times. Once for defending a fellow inmate, once for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and once simply because in San Quentin the fact that you existed was enough for someone to want you dead. Yet in the middle of all that violence, something unexpected happened. Danny Trejo woke up. He once said he didn't want to die, as a nameless junkie in prison. And that sentence became the turning point of his life. Trejo quit heroin, left the gang world, and began helping other inmates overcome addiction. After his release, he became a counselor, helping addicts fight the same battle he had lost many times before, finally defeating it within himself. And that very work opened the door to Hollywood in a way no one could have predicted. Trejo didn't go to auditions. Trejo didn't seek directors. Hollywood found Trejo. When a screenwriter happened to see him counseling a young actor on a film set, the first thing he said was, "We need someone who looks like you." And just like that, Danny Trejo stepped onto the screen not as a promising actor, but as one of the most dangerous men a camera had ever captured. From Heat 1995, where he stood alongside legends like Pacino and De Niro, to Machete, where Trejo became a modern symbol of Hollywood violence, every role he played shared one truth. He wasn't acting like a tough guy. He was a tough guy. Every scar on his face required no makeup. Every cold stare required no direction. They were the legacy of San Quentin, of heroin, of gangs, of life-or-death fights no one dared to ask about. What makes Danny Trejo the perfect opening name on this list isn't that he has wielded swords, guns, or played dozens of criminals. What makes him a legend is a simple, brutal truth. He survived places where most people would die after taking a single step. In Hollywood, everything can be faked, except the one thing Danny Trejo has in abundance: the survival instinct of a man who has looked death in the eye and smiled. And if you think Trejo is already crazy and made of steel, wait until you meet the second man on this list. I promise you things only get... Mr. T, the man who made Hollywood bow. Born into a family so poor they didn't even have enough beds for all 12 siblings, Mr. T grew up in the slums of Chicago, where violence was the common language and poverty felt like destiny. When winter came, there were nights he had to sleep outside on the porch, because there was no space left inside the cold biting into his skin, like a reminder that this world had no place for the weak. To survive, he threw himself into street fights. Not a few for fun, but more than 1,000 throughout his youth. Every punch he threw wasn't to win, it was to stay alive. From blood-stained streets and dust-covered alleys, Mr. T moved into the world of nightclub security, where real strength was the only currency that mattered. And in that world, he rose like a storm. Not many people can say they have served as a bodyguard for Muhammad Ali, Michael Jackson, Steve McQueen, Diana Ross, and even Bruce Lee. But Mr. T can. His presence carried such an indescribable force that within the security world, there was a saying, if Mr. T shows up, the fight ends. No shouting, no threats. He just had to walk into a room and the entire crowd fell silent. With his proud mohawk steel block muscles and a stare that made men swallow their fear, Mr. T became a face Hollywood simply couldn't ignore. Sylvester Stallone, searching for a real opponent for Rocky III, needed only one look to know this was the guy who could make Rocky look like he was about to die for real. While filming, one punch from Mr. T to Stallone's chest sent him crashing to the ground instantly. No effects, no acting, no simulation. Stallone later admitted in an interview, his punches hurt. A lot. And that's how Clubber Lang was born, not as a fictional character, but as a cinematic reflection of Mr. T's own reality. Fierce, relentless, raw, and carrying the survival energy of a man who had faced poverty, violence, and the streets every single day. But the most shocking part is that beneath that intimidating exterior, Mr. T is a man of extreme discipline. No smoking, no drinking, no drugs. He trained like a soldier, slept on schedule, ate clean, and kept that philosophy for decades. He once said, "I'm not strong because I fight. I'm strong because I have the discipline life could never break." Mr. T's toughness didn't come from movies. It came from being thrown to the bottom of society and clawing his way up with his fists, his willpower, and a discipline so ruthless it became his armor. Hollywood didn't create him. Hollywood simply discovered a storm that had existed long before. Wesley Snipes, the warrior of the night. If Danny Trejo is the soul of the streets and Mr. T is the fist of raw violence, then Wesley Snipes is something entirely different. A technical warrior, a body engineered for combat since adolescence, a legend Hollywood both respects and worries about. No CGI, no stunt doubles, no exaggeration. Wesley Snipes, born in 1962 and raised in the gun-ridden South Bronx, is the real-life version of Blade. Wesley's childhood was spent in run-down housing projects and on street corners, where any kid who didn't know how to defend himself was either beaten or swallowed whole by the environment. But in that chaos, young Wesley found his salvation: martial arts. At age 12, while most children were worrying about homework, Wesley was studying karate, then hapkido, then capoeira, then kung fu. Not for fun, but as a way of life. Years later, he would become a 5th Dan black belt in Shotokan karate, a 2nd Dan in hapkido, with deep foundations in capoeira and full-contact kickboxing. For Snipes, martial arts weren't an acting skill, they were DNA. By the late 1980s, Hollywood began paying attention. But between 1991 and 1993, with New Jack City, White Men Can't Jump, and Demolition, man, Wesley Snipes truly entered the ranks of elite actors. And then came 1998, the year the world learned that if there was one black actor capable of creating an action explosion strong enough to pave the way for Marvel's future, it was Wesley Snipes. Blade, released in August 1998, wasn't just a film, it was a declaration. A black hero in black leather wearing dark shades, wielding a Japanese sword, moving with a speed and precision that only real-life mastery could achieve. And everything you saw on screen, the spinning kicks, the lightning-fast slashes, the gliding through the shadows, was Snipes himself. No fakery, no stuntmen, no simulation. No one forgets the line. He didn't play a vampire slayer, he moved like one. Because it was true. When Snipes swung a sword, you believed he could break real bone. When he kicked, the sound cracked like torn air. When he surged across the screen, you understood this wasn't an actor performing a role. This was a martial artist doing what he did best. But Wesley Snipes' toughness wasn't defined only by martial arts. It came from his iron temperament, something Hollywood learned to fear. He argued with directors if he felt the action craft wasn't respected. He would walk off set if he felt the script was nonsensical. The behind-the-scenes stories on Blade Trinity 2004 became legend. For one simple reason, Wesley Snipes didn't like being controlled. A true warrior never enjoys being put on a leash. Then came the fall. In 2006, Snipes was charged with tax evasion. In 2008, he received his sentence. In 2010, he entered federal prison. A top-tier action star dropped to the bottom overnight. But even there, people understood something more about his toughness. Wesley Snipes entered prison like a soldier training daily, keeping his body sharp, refusing to break. When he walked out in 2013, he was still forged of steel, ready to fight again. And he returned. With The Expendables 3 2014, with Coming to America 2021, and with a Blade cameo in his 60s, proof that true warriors don't grow old. They only change their... Yaphet Kotto, the Man of Stone. There are actors who step onto the screen with technique. Others rely on looks. But Yaphet Kotto, he needed none of that. He walked in, and the entire room fell silent. Not because of fame, but because of the eyes of a man who had lived in places where weakness had no place to exist. Born in 1939 in New York, Kotto grew up in an era where gangs, racism, and poverty blended into a persistent, heavy darkness. His teenage years drifted into street groups, witnessing real fights, real chases. Not long after, because of the environment he was associated with, the FBI monitored Kotto for years, a constant pressure that could break most people. But he didn't fall. He pulled himself away from the path of violence with a choice few could predict acting. What's fascinating is that Yaphet Kotto never needed to act tough. He had natural toughness forged by real fear, real vigilance, and survival instincts the streets of New York forced into him. When he appeared on Broadway in the late 1950s, he immediately drew attention because he didn't perform like anyone else. No showing off, no theatrics. He stood there as if ready to respond if something came at him. Audiences felt that before he even opened his mouth. Hollywood began to notice this rough diamond. Then he appeared in Live and Let Die 1973 as the villain Dr. Kananga opposite James Bond. No shouting, no evil monologues. Just one long, heavy gaze, as if he were calculating whether his opponent deserved to keep breathing. Directors all agreed on one thing: you can't teach that. He brought it from real life. But it was in Alien 1979 that Kotto's power truly erupted. In a film drenched in fear, he didn't act Hollywood-style panic. He genuinely looked like someone who had felt danger breathing down his neck before. As Parker, every small movement, a glance, a tensed shoulder, a breath conveyed one message: I've seen dirty things out there, and whatever is on this ship makes me not want to be alone for even a second. That was psychological toughness no CGI could replicate. But what made him a legend among black actors wasn't the cold eyes or the street-shaped past. It was dignity. At a time when Hollywood still laid out degrading stereotypical roles for black performers, Kotto repeatedly refused them. No cheap slave roles, no comic relief caricatures, no roles that harmed the dignity of the community he represented. He said, "I wasn't born to play parts that make black people look small." And he kept that promise his entire career. Yaphet Kotto's toughness wasn't in punches or muscles. It was in silence heavy as stone, in a gaze that made others uneasy, in the will to stand tall in an industry that was never built to welcome. Fred, the Hammer Williamson, the steel elbow strike. If Yaphet Kotto carried the power of an unflinching gaze, then the next figure brings an entirely new level of tough, real physical force, measurable, audible, and unmistakably felt when it crashes down. This is the man who stepped out of the NFL with a nickname that needs no explanation: the Hammer. Fred Williamson never needed to look intimidating. He was intimidation. Born in 1938, Williamson shook the NFL from the late 1950s to the mid-1960s, while playing for the Oakland Raiders, Kansas City Chiefs, and Pittsburgh Steelers. But what terrified the entire league wasn't his speed or height. It was the devastating elbow strike he turned into a personal trademark. Football commentators of that era described it simply: when the Hammer swings his arm, the man in front of him goes down. No exceptions. That brutality, confidence, and utter fearlessness followed him straight into Hollywood, where he quickly became one of the leading figures of the Blaxploitation era. a time when black characters rose as bold, rebellious symbols of power. But Fred Williamson stood apart in one key way. He didn't just play a tough guy, he was a tough guy, and everyone knew it. When he entered cinema in the 1970s, production crews immediately realized he wasn't the type to recite lines and film a nice-looking fight scene. No, he wanted to do everything himself, perform his own stunts, design his own fight choreography, control the level of violence, and most importantly, he wanted the hits to be real. More than once, directors had to cut the shot because Williamson hit so hard that the stuntman or co-star was left dazed. But no one dared complain because complaining to the hammer sounded like a terrible idea. His sets became legendary for one story. If anyone disrespected him, there was a real chance Fred would teach them with the same elbow strike that once forced the NFL to adjust player safety rules. In films like Black Caesar, 1973, Three the Hard Way, 1974, and Original Gangstas, 1996, Williamson didn't really act. He stepped onto the screen and audiences saw himself, a man with the aura of a conqueror, who never bowed, never apologized, and always walked straight toward danger, as if he was the danger. What made Fred Williamson a monumental black tough guy icon wasn't just the elbow strike, it was his defiance. He once stated plainly, "If they want me to fall in a movie, I'll decide how I fall. No one writes my ending." And he kept that philosophy for decades. No director could command Fred, no studio could tame him, and no actor ever forgot the feeling of sharing a frame with the hammer. Fred Williamson is a reminder that true toughness isn't found in muscle, but in self-determination, in refusing to let anyone diminish you, whether in the NFL or in Hollywood. And if you think an elbow strike is the peak of power, wait until you meet the next figure. A man whose fury could make even the wildest street rage look tame. That man. Jim Brown, the Storm of Power. Born in 1936, Jim Brown grew up with sports, but what he brought onto the field wasn't mere technique. It was raw, primal strength, the kind that made 120-kilogram giants move out of his path. Playing for the Cleveland Browns from 1957 to 1965, he shattered every record over those 9 seasons, leading the NFL in rushing yards 8 times, winning MVP 3 times, earning 8 All-Pro selections, and retiring at the absolute peak of his dominance. But what made him a legend wasn't the statistics. It was the sheer physical authority he commanded. Commentators of the era described it without hesitation. If you stand at the wrong angle, Jim Brown will run through you like a brakeless truck. The entire NFL had to adjust its strategies because of him. Teams created new defensive systems simply to survive facing Jim Brown. That was the level of power no modern action star could even imagine today. Yet that power came with a dark side one that made Jim Brown one of the most controversial figures in American sports history. Throughout the 1960s to the 1990s, Brown was implicated in multiple incidents involving assault fights and domestic violence. Some cases were dismissed, some settled, some resulted in penalties. But one thing remained constant. Jim Brown carried the aura of a man whose anger could ignite at any moment. Maybe because he was too strong, too confident, and too direct. Brown didn't know or didn't want to hide his impulsiveness. He didn't fear scandal. He didn't fear the press. He didn't fear enemies. Wherever he went, the field or a bar, Jim Brown was always the absolute alpha. And sometimes that created collisions ordinary people couldn't handle. Yet Hollywood saw something else in him, a powerful black masculine icon, something the era desperately needed. And so Brown stepped into cinema, blowing open the door for future black actors. In his role as Jefferson in The Dirty Dozen, 1967, he didn't just impress, he erupted. The coldness, the power, and the don't care attitude from his NFL days traveled straight onto the screen without any refinement. Audiences could sense instantly this wasn't acting. This was Jim Brown. In one of the film's classic scenes, Brown charges through gunfire, hurling grenades into enemy bunkers, and people believed he could do it in real life. That was the moment Jim Brown became Hollywood's first major black tough guy icon, paving the way for Fred Williamson, Richard Roundtree, Pam Grier, and many other blaxploitation legends. Brown also routinely rejected weak or submissive roles. He wanted to play strong men, unapologetic, unbowed, and unshaken, exactly like himself. Jim Brown was far from a flawless model. He had heroic achievements, dark chapters, and a force so great that both the NFL and Hollywood learned to tread carefully around him. But it was that very imperfection that shaped a uniquely real kind of toughness, forged from conflict victory mistakes and sheer survival. Michael Jai White, The Punch. Even the UFC steps back. From after Jim Brown, the unstoppable force of the NFL, you might think no one else on this list could possibly intimidate the Warriors who came before. But you would be wrong, very wrong. Because the next man isn't just strong, isn't just fast, isn't just dangerous. He is one of the most complete martial arts actors America has ever produced, with credentials so real that even professional UFC fighters respect him. This is Michael Jai White, the man whose martial arts resume makes Hollywood hold its breath. Born in 1967, Michael started training martial arts at age 7, and by adulthood, he had collected enough qualifications to become a living legend, 7 official black belts in 7 different martial arts. Not honorary belts, not promotional gimmicks, real combat-tested ranks in Shotokan Taekwondo, Tangsu, Dugojuryu, Wushu Kyokushin, and foundational Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When most people brag about one black belt, he just smiles. When others say they used to train, he has a list of credentials longer than an action movie script. What makes Michael stand out is that he never treated martial arts as decoration. To him, it was religion, discipline, and a way of life. He taught martial arts in Connecticut before becoming famous, and he has always trained as if preparing for the most brutal fight of his life. That's also why UFC fighters who have trained with him, including Kimbo Slice and Josh Barnett, all say the same thing: Michael hits for real. Not movie pain, not camera-friendly pain. The kind of pain that makes a trained fighter instinctively pull back. Want to know how real it gets? Simple Michael Jai White performs all his own action choreography. And when he spars on set, he hits with real force. Not out of arrogance, but because he wants every strike to carry weight rhythm and real danger. As he once said, if the punch has no power, the audience can feel it. The result, every action director both loves him and fears him. Stunt performers admire him but grit their teeth every time they have to take a hit. Co-stars respect him but always keep a safe distance during fight rehearsals. Hollywood quickly realized that Michael Jai White wasn't an action actor for fun. He was a rare martial arts master in American cinema. His breakthrough arrived in 1997, when he became the first black actor to lead a major theatrical superhero film with Spawn. A new tone, a new energy, a fierce yet shadowy presence that only he could deliver, even though the film didn't reach the commercial success. Expected Michael Jai White became an icon, a black superhero tougher than steel. Then came Undisputed 2 2006, and this was when he truly exploded. As George Iceman Chambers, Michael faced Scott Adkins, one of Europe's most dangerous action performers. But what stunned audiences was that Michael was even faster and stronger than anyone expected. His spinning kicks, diagonal strikes, and body shot punches carried real force and real speed, turning the film into a benchmark for 2000s fight cinema. Even Adkins, famous for his conditioning and iron discipline, admitted Michael is so strong that in many scenes I had to dodge for real. I didn't dare block. But Michael Jai White's toughness isn't just about black belts, it's attitude. He dislikes fakery, dislikes shortcuts. He wants every fight scene to feel so real that the audience feels like they're witnessing an actual match. In a Hollywood filled with paper heroes, Michael Jai White is a reminder that some people don't play warriors. They are warriors. And that warrior with 7 black belts and a punch that even UFC fighters avoid deserves his place among the greatest black tough. Denzel Washington, the quiet kind of dangerous. After the muscle-bound warriors, the NFL legends, and the martial arts masters, we arrive at a man whose toughness takes an entirely different form. Not strength, not punches, but an aura so sharp it drops the temperature in a room within seconds. No one embodies this more than Denzel Washington, the man Hollywood describes with 2 words: quiet danger. What makes Denzel extraordinary is that he never has to shout, never has to swing his fists, never has to slam a table. When he looks at you just with his eyes, you understand immediately that you should keep quiet. That kind of presence cannot be trained, faked, or learned. It comes from real life. Denzel was born in 1954 in Mount Vernon, New York, into a working-class family. He grew up in a community where violence was something you witnessed before finishing elementary school. Many of his childhood friends joined gangs, ended up in prison, or died young. His mother eventually sent him to a private school far away because she feared the streets would swallow him whole. Denzel has said there were neighborhoods where he was not allowed to walk home alone, and those experiences shaped the sharp observation, the people-reading instinct, and the natural vigilance he carried into adulthood. Poverty loss and the constant sense of walking the survival line forged him into one of the psychologically strongest actors in Hollywood. And when someone like that studies a character, things become dangerous. Denzel doesn't simply read scripts, he lives inside them. He studies real FBI files, meets real former agents, speaks with real criminals, and goes into neighborhoods most people would avoid. Preparing for training day, he spent weeks blending into high-crime areas of Los Angeles to observe how corrupted officers operated. No notes, no interviews, just watching, absorbing. That's why his portrayal of Alonzo Harris in Training Day 2001 chilled audiences to the bone. He didn't act dangerous. He made you believe you were sitting next to a man who had lived with violence so long that it had become part of his smile. The role earned him the Oscar for Best Actor. But more importantly, it made Hollywood understand a new kind of menace. The menace of someone who controls everything. Then came Man on Fire, 2004, where his character Creasy embodied ruthlessness, persistence, and quiet grief. Without flashy kicks or stylized gunplay, Denzel projected the power of a man who had lost everything and wasn't afraid to crush the world to protect the last thing he cared about. Every heavy breath, every slow step, every line delivered like a blade proved that real strength sometimes lies not in action, but in silence before the storm. What places Denzel Washington among the greatest black tough guys in history isn't physicality or martial skill, it's psychological invulnerability. He doesn't flaunt his strength. He doesn't try to be a hero. He simply inhabits his characters so fully that audiences feel like they're facing someone. Samuel L. Jackson, the man who walked out of hell. Alive. If Denzel Washington is quiet danger, then Samuel L. Jackson is exploding danger. Not through punches, but through a will harder than steel. The kind that pulled him from the depths of addiction and turned him into one of the greatest legends in American cinema. No bulging muscles, no martial arts background. Samuel L. Jackson is tough in a way that lives inside a kind of strength no gunpowder can break. Born in 1948 in Washington, D.C., and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Jackson faced poverty and racism from an early age. But the darkness that truly swallowed him came in adulthood heroin. Not a one-time slip, not a temporary phase. Samuel was addicted, deeply addicted, to the point that he admitted the first thing he thought about every morning was his next hit. The worst moment came when he overdosed a near-fatal collapse that almost ended his life. No one saw that scene on film, but imagine it: Samuel L. Jackson, unconscious on the floor, breathing in broken fragments, life hanging by a thread. That moment should have closed the final chapter. But fate wasn't done with him yet. His family discovered the truth. No speeches, no tears, no judgment. They took him straight to rehab, and Samuel didn't resist. He chose to walk into the very place addicts fear most, the place where you must face yourself head-on with no hiding, no lying, no masks. Rehab was brutal. It tore him apart, forcing him to examine every piece of his life. But within that darkness, Jackson found a new fire, something buried in his bones. If I can survive myself, no role and no hardship can ever break me again. He was right. After becoming completely clean, Samuel returned to theater and film with an intensity Hollywood had never seen before. His first major role after rehab was almost symbolic Gator in Jungle Fever, 1991, a man consumed by addiction spiraling to the bottom. Jackson played it so convincingly that audiences shivered, certain he was reliving his own past. The role won him a special award at the Cannes Film Festival, and his career ignited. Then came 1994, Pulp Fiction, Jules Winfield, the role that turned Samuel into Samuel. The stare, the voice, the half-smile, and the iconic line, "Say what?" again shot through popular culture like a bullet. No CGI, no superpowers. But Samuel L. Jackson made every character across from him feel fear, respect, and silence. There had never been someone this tough without throwing punches, tough through presence, through experience, through having looked death in the face and deciding, from now on, I run the game. And from then on, he became a hurricane diehard with a vengeance. Jackie Brown, Shaft, Unbreakable, and of course Nick Fury of the MCU films with a combined box office total of over 27 billion USD. No two roles are alike, but they all share one core truth. Samuel always brings a smoldering power to his characters, like a powder keg waiting to ignite. He has been to the bottom of hell, and no one is tougher than the man who knows. Jamie Foxx, surviving with death at his neck. After Samuel L. Jackson. The embodiment of iron, the final figure on this list brings a kind of toughness few expect. It doesn't come from gangs. It doesn't come from prison. It doesn't come from aggression. Jamie Foxx's toughness comes from heroic instinct survival reflexes and the will to cross the line between life and death and come back standing. Born in 1967 in Texas, Foxx is famously multi-talented comedy music, acting, singing. He excels at all of it. But few know that behind that cheerful persona is a man shaped by military-style discipline and a fighter's spirit. For many years, Foxx trained seriously in boxing, not to look good for movies, but to keep his body in a state of real combat readiness. He had a private coach, sparred for real, took real punches, and hit hard enough to make opponents step back. That passion for boxing gave Foxx something rare in Hollywood, the reflexes of someone who can handle real-world danger. And that was proven in 2016 during an incident that shocked America. Jamie Foxx saved a man from a flipped burning truck right outside his home. When people heard the crash, most froze. Foxx ran straight toward the fire. No hesitation, no calculation. He and a passerby broke the window, cut the seatbelt, and pulled the victim out just seconds before the vehicle exploded. Police confirmed, if Jamie Foxx hadn't run in, the man would have died. That wasn't acting. That wasn't a movie stunt. That was pure instinct, the kind of instinct only a truly tough person possesses, where reflex overtakes fear. But Jamie Foxx's greatest battle didn't come from flames. It came from inside his own body. In 2023, Foxx suffered a mysterious and severe medical emergency that nearly killed him. His family hid details, doctors demanded total isolation, and Hollywood erupted with rumors that he wouldn't make it. For months, Jamie fought through pain, partial paralysis, and mental exhaustion. And that was when the real tough man emerged. When he finally returned to the public eye, Foxx admitted, "I had to face the worst. There was a moment when I thought I wouldn't come back." But he did come back. Upright, clear-headed, stronger. He didn't need to shout to prove toughness. You could see it in the way he stood, the way he smiled, the way he thanked the audience. Jamie Foxx had won a war most people never recover from. Cinema only amplified that toughness. In Collateral 2004, Foxx played a gentle taxi driver forced to survive a night of gunfire and chaos. Every psychological shift felt authentic because it came from a real place, from a man who has faced danger and knows you must stay sharp to stay alive. Then came Django Unchained 2012, where Jamie Foxx became Django, a slave who endures torture, loss, and brutality to reclaim his freedom. The cold determination, the buried rage, the steel in his eyes made the character feel real. Not because Foxx acted well, but because he understands pain and the power of rising after being knocked down. He is tough because when confronted with death, whether someone else's or his own, he chooses to act. From prison cells fight, rings the streets and battlefields, to the very edge of life and death, these 10 figures didn't just play tough. They were tough in their blood, in their bones, and in every choice they made to survive. If you want to keep exploring Hollywood's untold stories, the secrets, the real lives, even crazier than the movies hit, subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment below to tell us who shocked you the most.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on the screen.